Join as you go crochet is a lot like those annoying ads on social media that ask, can you join all of the tubes together without overlapping? And then draw you in with some sort of daunting phrase like, only geniuses can do it. Creating a join as you go crochet pattern, especially for a garment, can feel a lot like that. But you don't actually have to be a genius, and it's actually quite fun. Today we're gonna create a join as you go crochet pattern, and I'm gonna show you how you could potentially do this on your own as well, using one of the first patterns I ever made. Hello and welcome back to Rebecca in Europe. For sustainable statement making fashion. Today I'm excited to be sharing a tutorial inspired by one of our Colorful Crochet community members. A huge thank you and shout out to Silent Princess 360. This tutorial is for you. We'll begin with the original pattern, introducing the join as you go method. After that, we'll move on to a vibrant summer ready edition of this pattern, perfect for warmer weather and putting our join as you go method to practical use and giving you a hands-on visual of what that looks like. Let's get going and master that join as you go crochet method. I'm gonna regret this later. First up, the original version of this easy granny square sweater. This version used a raw wool in a very large hook. And thanks to my cat Francis, who loves to do his thing with this anytime he finds it outside of the closet, it is felting together really nicely. So this piece will really only get better with time. It features 6 main body granny squares on the front, 6 on the back, 1 on either shoulder, and then 3 to form the collar for a total of 17 granny squares. Not a complex piece to make. What makes this pattern stand out from your typical granny square sweaters is the creative use of shapes to create more curvature in the body of the garment. A single crochet border is added to the outside of all of the squares, and then it is all joined together with a slip stitch seaming technique, making this a perfect candidate for that join as you go methodology. Quick crash course on join as you go. It's a fantastic technique where you both create the border and join all of the pieces together in one go. This means almost no yarn ends to weave in. You can finish the entire piece, all of the borders and the seaming, with one single strand of yarn, which is amazing. The first step in creating a join as you go pattern is to visualize the piece flat. This happens to be a specialty of mine, as I do a lot of traditional pattern drafting for sewing. To make it more interesting, I decided to treat it as a puzzle, and I suggest that you do as well. I first drafted a top-down view in Illustrator, which looks like this. From this aerial view, I needed to visualize the neckline and how the pieces curve in order to see how they all attach, since it is the border that we would then be focusing on, and we need to see how all of those joins are then going to happen. Although they're all granny squares, they all start out as squares, I represented them in a way that showed the way they bend in 3 dimensions around the body, since that also is how they're going to need to be joined together. This approach of showing things that curve as curves gives you a much better representation of what the garment actually looks like when it's seamed together. The puzzle was teed up. Can you connect to all of the lines without having to overlap? And I have a confession to make. Unexpectedly, I had so much fun doing this.
Together an animated diagram for you. I think that's the best way to see how to actually execute these steps on this join as you go pattern. Anytime you see these short arrows, it means you're doing a border stitch or single crochet. Anytime 2 of these arrow rows connect, 2 sides of the pieces come together, it turns into a double pointed arrow, which means that you do a single crochet and then your slip stitch to connect the 2 pieces as you go. We start in the lower right-hand corner doing that single crochet border around 3 sides of our first piece. We then connect our second granny square with the single crochet, slip stitch, as you can see here with the yellow arrows. We then border the top of that square, do another border down the side, then add our third square with a single crochet slip stitch. we don't do the third border on the third granny square, and instead we join the fourth granny square on that top border and then continue our border join pattern on the interior, joining all the body granny squares. We then do add an outside border on this sixth piece and then bring that border all the way across the top of all 6 pieces, but we don't crochet all the way across that top left corner piece. We stop right before the end and turn and then add our shoulder piece. In order to show you how this accurately curves around the body, I'm going to change the orientation of whatever piece of the neck opening you're looking at right now. We're going to now do a border stitch across that shoulder piece and then join it to our first piece of the collar, which is the side collar. So that's what you're looking at right now from the top. You then continue adding the base of the front center collar granny square, only joining it to the front body, and then you do a full border stitch around that entire front center granny square collar piece. The front collar piece is then attached to the side collar, which you have already attached, and then finish with a border across the top. A border stitch is then done down the inside back of that side collar piece, which is then joined to the final third collar piece. At the center back, this final collar piece is then given a top border stitch, then connects to the front center collar, then joined to the outer shoulder piece. The right front shoulder piece is then attached to the front of the body. The right shoulder piece then has the complete rest of that granny square bordered, and then finally the bottom center back of the collar piece is bordered. We begin the back body in the center of the center granny square, giving that a border and then following our zigzag technique. Instead of just a border stitch on the outside of this granny square, you are joining it with your slip stitch to the front right side of the main body of the garment. You'll notice on the front only one side has a border, so you are going to be only joining to the side that is already bordered. We then continue with our border zigzag pattern. You know what these arrows mean, so you can follow along for the rest of this part. Then we finish the back with a full border around the outsides without joining either the bottom or the other side to the front. Last tricky part, that border should end in the middle of the center back. And then you will notice that you still have a tiny bit of border along the bottom of your top collar and that front right shoulder that are unattached. Single crochet slip join these and then trace the edge of your garment by doing the final border along that right shoulder piece to the front of the garment. Home stretch, you now single crochet and join the front to that last open back side. Everything should be joined. And then the last thing that you have to do is just one final single crochet border along the bottom edge. That's kind of amazing, right? I guess I do love puzzles, but if you saw the scrap yarn hoodie pattern that I released recently, you probably guessed that already. Now I know you're thinking, I can't replicate what order you did that in, even using that diagram. Maybe not, so I numbered it for you, and here it is. Feel free to take a screenshot and use that to make this for your join as you go pattern. I'll link the other video with all of the details for this, including hook size and other specifics, but I'm ready to switch it up. So let's get ready and do that summer version of this pattern.